Today's class, we will be going with data collection. This is our fourth module. And in this module, we are going to discuss about the types of data, the different types of data collection instruments, and the factors which you need to take care when you're going with the data collection, because that's very important, and it is one of the important factors that decides the quality of our research. So we will start with what is data, and then we will go, this is the content of our today's class. We will discuss about types of data and overview of different data collection methods, that is both qualitative and quantitative. Along with that, we will also discuss about, or we'll try to distinguish between experience survey and case study. Case study we had already discussed in our class, but we will make a difference between experience survey as well as case study. And then we will go with different observation methods, which is part of the quantitative data collection. Okay, so this is how we go with. Now, as I said, data, when you look into, it can be of two types. One is the primary one and the other one is secondary one. When I'm talking about the primary one, data would be collected by the researcher or by the investigator by himself for the purpose of his study. So it is little more customized towards the need of the researcher. Whereas secondary data, definitely the researcher or the investigator would be collecting it. But what we have to understand is that data might have been collected by some other researcher for his study. And we are using that for our present study by resorting to that source. So that's a basic difference between primary data and secondary data. And secondary data most probably will include published data like government records or records about the performance of different sectors in the economy that is being published. Or maybe some researchers have already conducted a study in a particular area and we are using that for our study. And any type of such unprocessed fact is something which we call as data. Why we call it as unprocessed is it's not ready for us to be used for our final analysis. We have to go with a lot of steps which we are going to discuss in our future classes, like data cleaning, right? Then the validity check, then maybe coding is needed. It's, for us to go with the analysis. Maybe we will have to avoid some because of incomplete data. So that's why any kind of unprocessed data that is collected by the researcher would be called as data. Okay, and as I said, data can be of two types. It can be primary data as well as secondary data. When we are talking about primary data, those category which is collected by the researcher or the investigators also. In last survey, there can be many people engaged in data collection method, data collection, and collected by the investigator or researcher, taking care of the need of that particular study. Right. So that's about data. Now, when we look into research context, basically we can find two types. One is the kind of experiments which is being done, and another one is survey. Survey can be sample survey or census survey. We have talked about census survey when the whole units within the population is studied. We call that as census survey. And when a sample is being selected from the designated population, we call that a sample survey. But there is a data collection. There is a process that is involved in collecting the data from the respondent. Right. In case of experiments also, maybe you are trying to understand the relationship between two variables through various experimentations. And these experimentations normally refer to that is being conducted in a laboratory conditions, or maybe within a lab. So you have, no, in science it is very easy. That's why I put the picture also like that. In science, it is very easy to understand that laboratory, how it is, because most of you, till your 10th, you have gone with lab experiments. And also, you know that you have some kind of logical reasoning when you try to find out the reaction between two chemicals. or maybe the action between two variables. You have some idea. So that's why we say that normally experimental research are logical methods of answering a particular question. So if I say that, yes, this is it, if I can show it, then there is no other question or further analysis that is required, if I can exhibit it. So that is the plus point of an experiment, as we call. But when we look into the social science research, conducting an experiment within a lab and proving a scenario is pretty difficult, because in social science research, most of it would be connected with human being, with mankind. So in that case, maybe we really have to collect the data, ask them and collect the data from them, and then establish some logical reasoning before arriving at the conclusion. So that's a basic difference that happens because of the methods we follow to conduct the research. So we can say that we have that doesn't mean that in social science research we do not have experiments. We have many experiments, like for example theory X and Y. It's actually, even though you know, within an environment created by the researcher, the experiment is being done to understand about X category of workers and Y category of workers. So there is an experiment, there is a logical explanation to the factors that is being discussed in that maybe research. So that is being conducted in a situation, a particular situation, right? And you are making comparisons between the units under step. So that is why experiments are being done, but it is pretty difficult, different from what we refer to when it is a scientific research in a laboratory, right? So that is a basic difference between experiments and survey. And definitely in a survey method, we are going into, in most of the cases, we are going into the field for collection of data. It's not something that can happen within the four walls of a room. That's a basic difference. Now, as I said, when we are talking about primary data, we said that it is the data that is collected by the researcher himself for the first time for the purpose of his research. That's primary data. And this primary data can be classified into, the methods of collecting primary data can be classified into two. One is qualitative method, another one is quantitative method. Now, as the name indicates, in case of qualitative methods, you are observing or you are trying to understand the verbal or non-verbal aspects of a particular scenario. And in quantitative methods, we are going to express, we are going to prove or disapprove a fact based on the statistical evidence. That's a particular thing which you have to remember. There is use of statistical tools and there is statistical evidence when you approve or disapprove. That's why the acceptability to data, the acceptability to quantitative methods are much higher than qualitative methods in research. Even though the scenario is being changed now for analysis of qualitative methods, so there are many new methods that's been arrived at. But overall, if you look, quantitative methods get more acceptance among the research community regarding the acceptance of a particular model, or maybe regarding the acceptance of the result of a particular research. Okay. Now going with, we first look into the qualitative methods. Qualitative methods, broadly, we can say that as experience survey or case study. Say, I want to know about maybe the Indian, maybe as we say, freedom movement. So it will be, I can have two views in that. I can talk to some people or some important personalities who have already participated in such movements. And I can also read books. But all of us know that maybe experience speaks much louder than your secondary data. Right. So in that case, I will go speak to a person who really had a kind of experience in participation in India's freedom movement. So that person would be talking from the reality, what he or the people of that time have experienced and what all they did to lead us to this present situation of freedom. All these. So it will be little interesting. But at the same time, in many cases, it is not possible. If I cannot, say, if I want to know about India in 1900, it may not be possible for me to get that conduct that experience survey. I will have to resort to some books or some videos or some content that is made, no, regarding those, India during 1900, or maybe I will have to resort to some of the newspaper which is being kept as a repository in the with the newspaper agency or in the library. I have to resort to those sources. But if I get a chance to know about a scenario by uh, being, or maybe there is another thing is I can be part of that group and experience it and then go with an understanding of the particular scenario, or I can also collect data from people who have really experienced it. Say now the war, or not war, maybe there is some conflict that is happening in between Palestine and Israel, and I really want to have a first-hand pulse of what is happening, what are the struggles of people who are living in those countries. So maybe it will be better. I have two options. I can just read through the newspapers, through the publications, but there is a personal bias involved in each type of information that is provided to me. So maybe I can talk with people who have really experienced that, which gives me a complete picture of what has happened over there. So that's kind of experience survey. Now the next one is case study. Uh, Case study method, as we say, this we already discussed what is a case study, but the basic difference between case study and experience surveys, in case study, we select one or two aspects and we give an in-depth analysis. We spend a lot of time in understanding that particular scenario, an in-depth analysis of that situation to arrive into conclusion, which means it is little more deeper. When you go deeper into, when you go no uh, when you're selecting few events, one or two events, and making a complete study of the entire thing in every possible way, we call that as a case study. So that's also a qualitative method. In fact, there are many methods of converting the case study into a quantitative methods when we involve a lot of data into that. When we collect a lot of, say, suppose if I'm going to study about a company, I can make that into a quantitative way by going with financial analysis of the performance of the company. That's possible for me. I will collect data from the financial statements of the company. I'll go with conducting different ratio analysis, or maybe horizontal or vertical analysis. I arrive at a conclusion regarding the profitability of the company. So in that case, my case study will not be qualitative in itself. It will be a mix of qualitative and quantitative method. Right. So qualitative methods broadly, but we can classify that into experience survey and case study. Then there is another thing which I would like to mention in this context. There is a concept called pilot survey. Suppose if I am very new to a particular research area and I want to know whether the tools used by me is correct or not, or I just want to get a pulse of what is it. I have used different instruments, whether I am going to get the right kind of information. I want to make a test of the actual condition. So that test survey is what we call as pilot survey. I'm just selecting a pinch from the total respondents. Suppose if I've selected my sample to be maybe 600, I'm just taking 10% of that and conducting a preliminary survey to form an understanding about my entire setup. Maybe I want to know about the respondents. I want to know about the efficiency of my data collection instruments. I want to ensure that I'm getting right kind of information. So I go with conducting a pilot survey. So that is actually a preliminary study for me to get a pulse of what would be the result of actual survey. So that is applicable to both quantitative as well as qualitative methods. In both these cases, I can go with pilot survey initially before going into the actual survey. Okay, so that concept is pilot survey. Pilot survey means from just to get an overview of the present situation, just a pulse of that. Okay. Now we will go into quantitative methods. Quantitative methods. In our today's class, we will be covering only observation method. Okay. Quantitative methods, broadly, there are a number of quantitative methods, but broadly we can classify that into four. One is the which we are going to discuss in our class. Okay. Observation method, interview method, questionnaire method, and schedule method. Okay. And when I'm talking about the observation method, as the name indicates, here the researcher is going with observing by being part of the group or maybe as an external person. So that's all about observation method, which we are going to discuss in detail. Second one is interview method. Is the data collection method is you are the researcher or the investigator is directly moving into having a personal contact with the respondent and placing the questions which are required and then collecting the data. It can be offhand and interview can be conducted by using a set of questions. You can have open-ended questions or you can give set of questions well prepared for the respondent. So there is direct face-to-face contact between the researcher and the respondent. Now, questionnaire method is you have a set that all of you know it very well. You all prepare a set of questions. You take a print of it, or maybe you send it online to your respondents, and they fill it and send it back to you. It can be sent over mail or email, or you even can use different investigators for collecting the data from the respondent. Then schedule method. It is here there is a little difference when we compare the interview method and schedule method. Here, in case of schedule method, it is much better than a questionnaire method because there is some kind of personal touch between the respondent and the interviewer. But the detailed explanation we will take it to the next class. Okay. So first we will start with the observation method. Now, observation method, there are different ways of observing, right? Knowingly or unknowingly, we do a lot of observations. And in that, some of it gets into our mind. Some of it just goes as passive as it is, right? So basically, observation method can be used when you're collecting, or it can be said that when you're collecting data based on your visual images, or maybe through listening, okay, through listening to different conversations, or it can be by reading the personal communication between different persons, or in case, if it is connected with some food or some chemicals, or maybe some maybe where you are talking about the fragrance of perfumes or something like that. You can do it with smelling or at times touching. Right, so it's used based on where observation method is done using our sense organs, right? And apart from that, there are non-verbal communications which happens without speaking, non-verbal body language, or maybe how you behave in a particular situation, and the spatial analysis, the relationship, the unspoken relationship, which you can understand by observing a particular scenario. So all that is part of observation method, which is a powerful tool when we are relating into different types of researches that is being conducted in the area of psychology, studying human behavior. This is one of the powerful methods that is being used by psychologists, which we all know, right? Because often your body language speaks louder than your words. You might be saying something, but people can understand much better by observing you, right? So that is the power of observation method. But the most difficult thing is it is time consuming. See, suppose if I have to observe a person, I don't know when he is behaving, when his behavior changes. I want to understand. So in that case, I might have to stay for the whole time along with him, which might not be so much appealing to that person who's been observed. So it is time consuming. At times, it can create conflicts among different individuals. Even in observation method, it is in hospitals and all, of course, a lot of observation methods are being used just to identify the nature of the patients, the kind of disease they are having, all that behavioral problems they're having. That is being used. But when it is being done into, into a reality where people are no, they are irritated because they are being observed continuously by a group of people, so that we may not like it. So that is the greatest drawback of an observation method. But the greatest advantage which can be capitalized through observation method is you get verbal as well as non-verbal communication. You can understand much faster when you are into study, maybe as a human behavior. You can understand much faster by observing that person, by listening to the verbal as well as non-verbal communication. If you are trained in that, okay, everybody cannot do that. You really have to be trained for observing and capturing data. So that is the plus point of observation method. Now going with different types of observation, structured and unstructured. Unstructured is the most common thing we all do when it is done for a research. We call that because there is no purpose. You're just observing as it is. You're trying to understand, right? Say, for example, I would like to know more about the students in a particular class. I don't have any other no, agenda for that. I want to know them. So I'm just without any pre-planned, I'm just observing them. That's called as unstructured. But when I want to understand, I have put another example. When I want to understand the kind of customer behavior in a cash counter, I have a purpose. I will not be looking into, I will not be observing when the customer is making his shopping, when the customer is, entering a shop, nothing. I will not be making any observation. But what I would be doing is when he is coming to the counter, when he is standing in the counter, I will be observing, okay, what is it he is doing? Is he going with impulse purchase, like after purchasing everything, seeing something in the counter, he's picking it? Or is he happy with the long queue in the counter? Or is he happy with the service being rendered at the cash counter? So I'm just observing. That's structured. I have a plan to, to conduct my observation. So that's a basic difference between structured and as we call unstructured observation. Now the next thing is participant and non-participant observation. In this, the most powerful one would be participant, but at times it may not be possible for us to be to be part of a particular group and conduct the observation. So for example, if I want to learn more about tribal community, the best method would be I have to go and live in a tribal locality, and in a tribal habitat. I have to understand how people are there in that particular locality, how they, what their lifestyles, their relationship, their job types of job being taken up by them, all these. So that is actually first-hand information, me being part of it. Or I can go with like non-participant observation. At times you go there, I ask them few questions, I collect the data from them, and then I arrive into. So that is, I am just going, observing them at times, or if I'm living in that, definitely when I'm living in that locality, the kind of observation which I make will be much better. But in certain cases, that may not be possible. So that is participant and non-participant. Participant is you are becoming group of, say, suppose if I want to know about a factory environment within a company, I can become an employee and then understand about factory environment. But at times it's not possible to become the employee of that organization. So what I do is, from outside, I observe and study about the factory environment. So participant is you become member of the community, and non-participant is as an external person, you're observing how is it happening. And then controlled and uncontrolled is, as we said in a unstructured one, it's in the natural setting. But you have a purpose, but it's just happening in the nature. See, I want to understand the behavior. the change in the behavior of children, who are coming into a college and going out after 3 years of their program, right, graduation program. So I can go with uncontrolled. Okay, I can just observe. I can go with the entry test or entry quiz and exit quiz. I'm just observing passively. I am observing it, right? But if I'm going with a controlled one batch given with all types of training, all these, and I'm observing the changes in them, and another group left like that and observing what are the basic difference between these two groups, controlled and uncontrolled groups. So that is, I'm trying to understand what is the effectiveness of training. So one group is controlled, another group is left like that without much intervention by the researcher and just observing the changes. So controlled always will have pre-planned settings and plans, whereas uncontrolled observation happens in the natural environment. Okay, and direct and indirect means the good example is when you are going with some investigation. Yeah, you can there is direct and indirect observation happen. One is when you're observing when that is being conducted, that investigation being conducted. And second one is you can watch the videotape of that and do some kind of observation. You can see how the culprits are behaving, or what was the situation of the place of that incident, all that through some electronic devices. So that's why direct and indirect. And disguised and undisguised means, in case of disguised, without awareness, they don't know that they are being observed, right? And undisguised is with the permission of the group. In fact, many of course, in medical condition that is different, but in other types, disguised observation is ethically not allowed in many of the developed countries. If you really have to observe a group, or if you really have to study a group, you have to get the permission from them in as an official document. You cannot just go and observe and come up with your study. You have to get the permission before you conduct the survey and before you try to observe them. And in medical condition, that is different, because you're trying to help the patient. You already got the permission when that patient, he or she is admitted as your patient in your hospital. But apart from that, most of the in India, we are not so careful, but still ethics say that if I'm observing an individual, he should be known that he is being observed. But then the problem with such studies, then knowingly or unknowingly, there can be some behavioral changes that can occur because you have been told you're observed by somebody. You may not be able to capture the real condition if they are being informed that they are observed for this particular study. That's a problem with observation method. So disguised is without awareness of the respondent, and undisguised is with you go with informing them, and they observe the entire situation. Say, for example, when you're conducting group discussion for a job opportunity, the group knows that they are being observed. Right, they have been recorded, they have been observed, which can be called as undisguised observation method. So these are the broad types of observation: structured and unstructured. Unstructured case, you just observe as it is, as it comes. But structured, you have a definite plan, a purpose. Participant is you becoming part of the community, and just the opposite is non-participant. Controlled is you have a set plan, pre-arranged plan, like you say that yes, these are the variables I'm going to observe, these are the I'm going to give a training to this particular group, and the other group is not offered with that training. So one group with training, another group without training. You want to know what is the impact of that training on the group of students. And that we already discussed when we are talking about different types of research design. Then direct and indirect. Of course, when you're going with the direct observation, you call that as first hand. You call that as a direct method. And indirect, mostly you will go with observing the videos or other data being, like maybe you go into clippings or photographs, all that, or some electronic device is being used for you to observe. Maybe you go with the footage of your camera, all that, right? Disguised and undisguised is disguised without awareness of the observing group, and undisguised is with awareness, right? So that's a type of observation. And just have a recap of what we have been doing. First, we talked about data. So data is unprocessed. Any type of unprocessed fact is called data. And when they are processed, when they are made suitable to serve the purpose of a research, they are called as information. Data, there are different types of data, but primarily they are primary and secondary data. And data collection methods can be classified into two, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative, we talked about the experience survey and case study. Quantitative, basically, we have the observation method, the interview method, questionnaire method, schedule method, which we are going to discuss in our class. And we talked about the observation methods. Observation is you are actually using your sense organs to capture the information regarding the respondents. And there are different types of observation methods which we discussed, like direct, indirect, controlled and uncontrolled, disguised and undisguised, based on the nature of or type of observation we make with respect to the responding group. Right. So these are broadly the type which is applicable. Most probably, when we are talking about observation method, we go with when we are planning to study about the human behavior, or when we would like to know when an individual behaves in a particular situation, or how he behaves, what's the reason for his behavior. In all such cases, there are possibilities that we resort to observation methods. So that's our today's class. In our tomorrow's class, we will go with the other methods, quantitative methods of data collection. So to summarize, you might be having a question of, how do I decide which is the best method for me? The first thing is, it depends upon the kind of result you expect and the complexity of the study. Suppose if I'm going to study a large group of 1,000 people, right? It is pretty difficult for me to, even though it is possible, but it is difficult for me to go with an interview method or an observation method. How can I remember the kind of behavior being exhibited by 1,000 people? It's difficult, right? Or maybe I want to observe a group which is large in number. It's very difficult for me to go with an observation method. So that is the basic logic in adopting a method depends upon the kind of survey or the kind of research you're planning to do. If I just have to observe maybe few students in a class, it's okay for me. But if I have to understand, come to a conclusion regarding the whole college or maybe large respondent, it will be safe or it will be good that I resort to a questionnaire method and maybe selective interview method, just to get the reality. There might be certain points which I cannot capture it through a questionnaire method, like non-verbal communication. So I can go with little. I chose maybe a small group to go with the interview method, to get the non-verbal communication, also to capture so that my research is complete in itself. It can have a holistic approach towards the problem under study. So that's the general logic with which we take care of the method which we use for data collection.